Hello and welcome to Go Green. This is a program that specializes in ways that we can look at the planet and how we can make changes in our own life on a daily basis. Little things, 10% changes, how we can recycle better, how we can maybe conservation in our home, how we drive our cars. And the big thing is learning to switch to green energy because it's new, it's changed, it's different. And so this is what it'll be about. We have a number of guests throughout this series who are specialists and experts, advocates, and some people are just learning about it too. So we're all in the same position, but tonight we have a very interesting guest. I first met our guest about approximately last spring, I believe, and she was at I think it was a health and wellness fair. And what attracted me to what she was doing, I thought she was a little strange, I'll tell you right now before we get any further, because she told me that she recycles almost all her trash, that she only saves just a little bit, and I thought about it. How could somebody do that? That's nearly impossible. And so on the way home, I started thinking about it, and I said, what do I do? How do I do my trash? And as a result of meeting our next guest, I got to the point where I'm now recycling about 80% of my trash and throwing 20 in. I don't think I'm ever going to get to the point that our next guest has got, but maybe she can show us a couple of things to do it. So it's really exciting to have our next guest, Kristen Walth from Newburyport.
Thank you for having me.
Kristen, what I'd like to find out, and I've been thinking about this for a long time since I first met you, what got you started in recycling at home? I mean, it must have been something that happened, one little spark that started you out, because I never met anybody so excited about recycling, which is cool.
Well, thank you very much. There were actually two sparks. And the first one was that I moved back to the US after living in Sweden for a very long time. And after living in Sweden and learning how they process their waste and all of the waste diversion that is expected there, it was very easy to see, or I should say it was very surprising to see how poorly it was done here in comparison. But the bigger item, or the bigger thing that happened, was I went to a meeting with the Department of Environmental Protection, the DEP, and there was a speaker there who noted that by the year 2020, according to the current solid waste master plan for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, we will run out of incinerator capacity with the 7 incinerators that we have in the Commonwealth, and we'll need to find some new answers. And the clever line, if you will, that stuck with me was we either need to diet or we need to buy new pants. Buying new pants means building a new incinerator, and I don't know anybody who wants a new incinerator.
Wow. And how long ago was this now when you first got that
I believe
inspiration?
This was 2011, because I was already living zero waste and got the idea to get a grant from DEP to do a zero waste pilot in the city of Newburyport.
Now, see, I think that's the thing that can help viewers. Zero waste, I see it around in a lot of communities starting to pop up. But can you tell me right from probably from a layperson's point of view, just what is it and how does it work and how do people get involved in it?
Sure. Sure. So first of all, I want to clarify that we call our pilot Toward Zero Waste. Okay. And the reason I say toward zero waste is we don't want to set expectations that absolutely cannot be met in today's society and with today's waste diversion streams that are currently available. So we call it Toward Zero Waste for the idea of how close you can come and getting the idea started without setting up disappointment. And living zero waste is actually very, very easy if you get into routines. Just like you remember to bring your car keys and your phone and your wallet when you leave the house. These are things that become second nature. So we actually figured out 4 things. We did a pilot in 2012, and we had 141 households that wanted to participate. And we figured out these 4 things. Number 1, most people want to do as much recycling as possible. They're eager to participate. But a lot of times it's very difficult to know how and what to recycle. So we wanted to make sure to clarify that. Number 2, there are numerous waste diversion schemes that can be utilized that are beyond the curbside bin. We call that our Beyond the Bend beyond the bin, excuse me, waste diversion. And we have a number of these at our recycle centers. So for example, we have recycling for styrofoam. We have recycling for chip bags. We have recycling for candy wrappers. We have recycling for keys. We have recycling for expired credit cards, hotel cards, you know, anything that's a plastic card. So we came up with new and unique diversion schemes. So that was number 2. Number 3 was we asked everybody to weigh everything.
Wow.
Yeah, so these 141 households weighed their trash, their recycling, and their organics. And it turned out, now I want to mention that these households were self-selected, so it's not a surprise to find out that their organics were over 50% by weight of all of their waste. So we got people to either be composting in their backyard or sign up for curbside composting, which is even better because when you do curbside composting with a commercial hauler, you can do meats, fats, dairies, and bones, which are things you absolutely cannot do in your backyard. The 4th thing we learned is how to get people motivated to do this, everybody to learn all of these things, and that is to implement pay-as-you-throw. The idea that you meter your trash the same way you meter both your water and your electricity. If I put out 1 bag a week and you put out 5 bags a week, that's not necessarily fair. However, we're respectively paying the same amount. But what if you paid more for your 5 bags? You would be more motivated to learn about how I'm doing it so that I can come down to 1 bag, that you could come down to 1 bag, I guess. So those were our 4 takeaways from our pilot.
So now, so you had, when you went out, the first thing I thought about, getting 141 people, and I'm thinking for myself, it wasn't hard to motivate them. And I think maybe because you're in Newburyport and you do have kind of a more green community, and it's been like that for a long time.
I think so, but to be honest, I would be willing to bet that these results would replicate almost in any community. I think there is a latent desire to be more green, because when we first put out the word about this, people were popping up everywhere, and people that you didn't necessarily expect.
Wow. You know, 'cause, I mean, when I think back, as I was talking earlier about when you were telling me that you recycle almost all of your trash, it was like, you know, there was question marks in my brain. That's all I could see. How could you do that? And now, I mean, I find myself, if I worked a little bit harder, I could get probably 90%, 10% and 90% recycled. But it's just thinking about it and not throwing something into the trash pot that's going to go in and be burnt, or it's going to be incinerated, or hopefully not end up in a landfill. That was my goal with the thing. And you'll be very proud of me. What I've done now, I've done something for this show alone. Right now, I am keeping with my ratio. I am presently dressed 80% recycled and 20% non-recycled. So everything I have on, except for my shoes and a couple other things, but my pants and shirt and everything comes from a recycled, one of the secondhand stores.
That's fantastic. May I take this opportunity to say that you're not recycling, you're reusing, which is even better than recycling. If you've ever seen, you've heard about the R's, the 3 R's, reduce, reuse, recycle. There are actually 6 R's that get into much more detail. But the 3 R's are reduce, reuse, recycle. And recycle is the least positive, the best thing, the next best thing above garbage. It's always better to reduce, which is actually one of the things I was going to mention, that a lot of my zero waste living is more about source reduction at this point, and learning to evaluate, do I want to bring this into my home? Well, I can reuse it numerous times. I know how to get rid of the packaging in a environmentally responsible way. I find it to be environmentally acceptable, or I don't. There have been a lot of things that I've given up because of that. But you mentioned your clothes, and you have reused clothing, which is fantastic. That's great. Recycling clothing would actually be meaning to grind it up and to use it in some other way, using it as carpet padding or something like that.
Well, one of our guests a couple of weeks ago was a recycler. And you know Peter Shellenberger?
I sure do.
He was on. and he was telling how he sends his overseas
Right.
and all the things. So, I mean, what he told us, it made sense, because there's so much that it can be done with, but I can see your point. And I think that's the skill, is how do you get to the point where people in a community can really start thinking on that reuse and repurpose, and there's a number of terms that people are talking about now.
Right.
And, you know, I'm finding, I never did this before, but just for the show I went on, I'm gonna see if I can actually find things that I'm willing to wear, and I'm gonna take them from a secondhand store. And sometimes I'm amazed at what I can find in a store. And you can see it, and I know that that's gonna cost, if I bought it in a store, it costs $70, $80 for a shirt, or, you know, $200, $300 for a jacket. And I'm finding them for, you know, $7, $10.
That's
So, number one.
fantastic.
And it's great, that's recycling my money by keeping it, you know.
If I could share an anecdote with you that you might find interesting. There is a video that I'd be happy to send you the clip of, and it's women in India who are responsible for taking these bales of textiles that come over from the USA, and they are quoted as saying, the people in the US must have extremely expensive water because they can't wash their clothes. Clearly, they wear their clothes once and then they throw it away and buy new clothes, because all of our clothes that come over are in such incredibly perfect condition.
Well, that's what Peter was saying. He said, when these clothes get over there, it's so amazing to them that they have all this material that they can start to work with and do something with. So they get really excited about it. But you know, that's another thing I think that we have to look at as a society. How do we get out and start talking to people about this new movement? There's a group in China right now. There's a company in China, and it's specializing in manufacturing throwaway clothing.
Right, right.
So that he'll take a high-end jacket or a shirt or something like that, duplicate it, but it's so cheap that somebody can take it. The material is not great, but it looks something like the other one. Take it, and then people wear it 2 or 3 times, and that's about all you can get out of it, and pop it away. Like you said, they don't have to wash it. Dry cleaning is so expensive. So you want to find something that you can not dry clean, but throw away. So
Which is really unfortunate, because one of the ideas behind the zero waste movement is that you buy things of quality that last, that you don't have, that you're not generating so much waste. So one of the things, it's great that you are reusing by going to the secondhand store and buying clothing, but I bet you if you shopped your closet, there's a lot that you have in there already that's very viable and very modern or appropriate for the type of things that you're doing. So it's interesting that this is happening in China, and they're trying to prevent the idea of having to dry clean, but it's still, it's the idea that we need to build and use quality things that last a very long time in order to stop using up so many resources.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's, I guess from, you know, I would say, easily say, we're somewhat of a lazy society. Because I think the part, when I think of it, the other side of it is the composting part of your program that seems that people really have to get involved. That's something you just can't passively have a bag and throw it in the right container. You have to actually think about this, and then you have to do something with it. And you say composting takes up about 50% of our...
Right. So if you look at the EPA data, or even the Mass DEP data, it says it's anywhere between 20 and 30%. Now, I'll mention again that our 141 households were self-selected, so they were people that were already very excited and very enthusiastic about recycling and source reduction. So our results are probably skewed because of that. But organics by weight were 50% easily, and we had several households that it was upwards of 80% by weight. So organics are a huge, huge problem. And there's a huge, huge problem in that we throw away a lot of very, very usable food. We have people who are food insecure even in our own neighborhoods. So it's a shame on 2 levels. The other part about putting organics in the garbage is organics give off methane when they decompose. And methane is even worse than carbon dioxide as far as being a greenhouse gas. So when you're composting, you're doing a lot of things better to capture methane gas. You're using the food in a way that is going to be repurposed. But once again, we mentioned reduce, reuse, recycle. Composting is recycling food. It's breaking it down into a different way. What we need to do is stop wasting so much food, reduce. We need to reuse our food, make sure that any extra is distributed to people who are food insecure and or animals. Pig farmers love leftover food. People with chickens love leftover food. And then we compost.
Wow. So I think, and another thing, and I don't know how you do this. I mean, this would take an enormous amount of cooperation. But what I see, when I look at in fact, I was going to bring my bag of trash for you to prove that I'm doing it, you know. So like, because you're getting like the recycling police, you know, or the reuse police. But what I find is the size of things, you know, like it drives me crazy. You get a box that is this big, and it has, you know, a third to a half is filled. And so when you're filling your bag up with things that you really never had any use for, or it didn't provide you any value other than it looked bigger on the shelf, I guess. And so when you're paying an extra, what you don't want to pay, 25 cents over what you want to pay, it looks better. But I mean, have you ever thought, has anybody ever started talking about how you get the advertising community and the supermarket community to start doing something about boxes?
Absolutely. First of all, that is why I encourage people who want to work towards zero waste to buy in bulk. And what I mean is not buy in bulk like go to Costco and get the largest can of something. Go to Whole Foods or to a natural grocer and get your rice out of a bin and put it in your own container. Do things that you can eliminate having to have a container that even needs to be recycled. Because once again, recycling is just one step above throwing it out. So the minimizing recycling is a good thing as well. So that's one thing. There is an entire market in both Germany and France that has a full supermarket with no packaging. You are expected to bring your own packaging for all of the different items that you need or want.
So everything is in bulk? Is like, I mean,
It
even
is.
if you want to buy a can of beans?
All of your cereals, all of your, of course, all of your produce, all of your beans, all of everything. So there are a lot of things. And actually, there is a store, I believe, in Austin, Texas, that is starting this as well. And I believe it's called Ingredients.
That'd be really cool.
So there are lots of things that are moving in that direction. The other thing is a lot of companies are coming around as well. Their sustainability projects are saying we need to do what's right as far as our packaging. Packaging should be for marketing and for protecting the product and nothing more. But what's also interesting that you bring up packaging is a lot of towns and communities are seeing their recycling rates go down because packaging is actually getting very much lighter. If you remember your peanut butter jars, first of all, if you remember your peanut butter jars from 20 years ago, they were heavy glass.
Right.
If you remember them from 10, 15 years ago, they were very thick, very sturdy plastic. And now you can push your peanut butter jar pretty hard. So that they're coming down in the resource material, the resource demand for material. So that, in a way, is good. But wouldn't it be even better to go and get your fresh peanut butter, freshly ground, and put it into your own mason jar that you know, so you know exactly what the ingredients are, you know exactly when it was mixed, and you know there are no preservatives.
Oh, I mean, I think it almost seems, you know, from an American point of view, that almost seems impossible to accomplish. I mean, just because the way we've been brought up and the way we live, and you know, that we want that quick hit. Let me run into the supermarket. I got to grab things quick. I only got 2 minutes to go. And, you know, I do that myself. But one of the things I noticed, even at Whole Foods, I'd go there a lot and I'd get their bulk. And more, I noticed less and less of bulk.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a problem.
Some of the things have been cut down that they used to have, you know, maybe there'd be 100 items. And now there's probably down to 60 or 50 items. And I don't know whether that's just easy to deliver. And there is an excess cost on that. That's the other thing. So we have to learn to be good consumers, too.
There is. One of the things that I personally have found as far as Americans per se, especially compared to Europeans, is we expect things to be at a certain price point. We don't expect to pay for the externalities that a lot of our consumption requires. So that in itself is a problem, that we have a certain expectation of what food should cost, when in effect, really, good food should cost more.
Okay. And I think one of the other things, and I'm sure you're aware of these, but probably in a reusing method, a lot of the churches and probably a lot of people that are helping other people, they have what they call food kitchens now.
Right, right.
And so those cans and a lot of the stuff that would have been thrown away, or I don't know what they would have done with it, is being brought back in where people can actually pick them up for nothing. And I've looked at some of the boxes that people have taken out of a couple of kitchens I've been in just to check them out. And I'm amazed. I'm impressed by what they're giving them.
Right.
Pretty good stuff.
Right. And if you look at, well, first of all, one of the things that food kitchens, and I should say food pantries and meals, that are concerned about are expiration dates. But one of the nasty little secrets is food dates are not prescribed by the FDA. Food dates are best served or are established by the manufacturers, and a lot of times don't mean much. So there are a lot of things that are getting thrown out by supermarkets because they're by their sell date. Their fairly arbitrary sell date has passed, and those things are getting pushed off into garbage, which is a problem. But you mentioned something about going into these food pantries, et cetera, and I have to give huge kudos to an organization called Food Link in Arlington, Massachusetts, where they have a system, I shouldn't say a system, they have a program where they have volunteers go to different restaurants and supermarkets every day and pick up all of their leftovers, everything that they did not consume that is still edible. And they distribute it to this group of food pantries and meal service organizations. So the idea is Food Link, that the waste is not getting wasted. It's going to those who are in need.
Yeah, and no, I think there's so much work that could be done in there, because I think there's a self-protective side of some of the supermarkets too, because I understand a lot of them won't repurpose or recycle their vegetables. You know, and I think there's some liability factor in there, and there's the fact that, you know, we don't want to get rid of a customer. We want to,
right, we want
rather
people
throw
to pay
this
for
away,
this, right,
and get some new stuff.
right.
Yeah.
And that's understandable. As far as the liability, there are 3 new papers that have come out from Harvard, and I forget what department of Harvard, but they are on Good Samaritan Acts, and they're pushing the responsibility away from food generators, and saying, you don't need to worry about this. If you do this in good faith, if you provide this food in good faith, you cannot be prosecuted if there is something wrong with it. There's also coming down the pike some incentives, tax incentives, to get restaurants and grocery stores to say, hey, this is worthwhile to
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yes.
At least they can make something back on it
Exactly.
rather than just give it away. Yeah.
And we are trying in Newburyport, we're working on a program where we can help elevate and say, these are the restaurants that are providing, that are not contributing to the waste issue, and that are helping our food insecure, using it as a marketing technique to encourage people to choose them over other restaurants.
Now, as we get down a little bit on time, before I get too late, one of the things I wanted to ask you is, with your experience, and you've talked about this and you've met a lot about this, somebody watching this at home, are there 1 or 2, 3 simple things that you could recommend how somebody can get kicked off to start this and you know, start thinking about it without an overwhelming? And I also think a lot of, when I say this, I'm thinking about seniors.
Right.
Because
right.
I look at seniors as, in my group, what we call the baby boomers, they're responsible for a lot of these landfills. I mean, we made a mess. We took things and never thought and just threw them away, and we bought more and more and more. And we were the landfill people. And so I think what we should do also, I always encourage seniors to maybe do just a little more, you know. But,
that's great.
So why don't you, if you got a few points, maybe you could help them out to get started.
Certainly do. The first thing that I would recommend to people is to call your local recycling coordinator and find out where they have a list or how to recycle right, how to make absolutely sure you are doing everything you can to recycle everything you should, and even more important, or equally important, nothing that you shouldn't. Don't contaminate the recycling load. That's very important. So if you're practicing excellent recycling at the curb, that's one of the first things. Make sure you know you're doing that right. Number two, understand what other diversion streams are available. Know that textiles should not ever go into the trash. Know that styrofoam can be recycled in certain communities. Understand what it is you can do beyond the bin. Number three is look at your consumption, look at your garbage and say, what can I do to source reduce? What is it in here that I probably didn't need, or I should have bought an alternative, or I should have done without entirely. And number four is to look at organics, see what opportunities are available. Sometimes there are community gardens that will take compost. Sometimes there are curbside programs that can be independent of the community be picked up. And then number six, and this is a special one for seniors that I think is really important, is ask your city officials to look at pay as you throw. It's not fair that seniors who might have this much trash a week are paying the same amount for families that have this amount of trash per week. By metering our trash, we're getting people to think in terms of, oh, just like I don't leave the water running or I don't leave the lights on, I don't want to create any more trash than necessary. And quite frankly, with seniors, I don't want to have to pay for any more trash than I have to vis-a-vis other people in the neighborhood.
Okay, so there's a few things to get started with, and I think they're good ideas. But the big thing is if we can all get out and do something. I mean, my biggest thing is I like talking about it, I like thinking about it, I love the ideas, but when it comes to doing it, I have a hesitation. Anything new or change, I don't like it. But once I do it, like right now I'm 80-20, so 80% of my trash is being recycled, and 20% is going into the regular trash, wherever they take it. They're going to take it out and put it in an incinerator. So we've got some ideas here, and Kristen was great to give us all her experience. But what I'd like you to do, if you need some ideas or you want to become involved, contact us at the Go Green Consortium. And I'm going to put my email is up, and you can take a look at my email and send me an email. And I'll be glad to email you back or connect you with somebody who's doing something in the community that we're learning about. More and more, we're learning about more people that are doing it. So that if I have a question about recycling now, I know where to go. I can call Kristen. You know, if I want to talk about recycling clothing and textiles, I go to Peter. And so the number of things. So what I'm going to do is end this. It was a quick half hour. We could have done an hour, but I want to thank you for coming out.
Thank you so much for
Thanks a
having
lot.
me.
Okay.